Now what we're going to do is take a little break, and when we come back, in theory,
we will be talking to superstar Dylan Neal. Deputy Doug himself, people.
Wish us luck, everybody.
Are you hype? Get hype.
Beyond, beyond, beyond.
Okay, we'll be back. Bye-bye. Oh, shit.
There it is.
Okay, well, here comes Dylan Neal. 3, 2, and... Hello?
Hey, is this Josh?
This is Josh.
Hey, it's Dylan Neal calling. How are you?
I am amazing because we are talking to an actual Hollywood celebrity.
Oh, my God. Well, I'm glad your parameters are wide. Yeah, great to be here with you.
This is just amazing. We weren't certain until literally I heard your voice that this wasn't going to be a prank call.
Yeah, we kind of expected Baba Booey, Baba Booey, Baba Booey. So
yeah.
Yeah, sorry to disappoint there.
No disappointment.
No. This is happening, guys. Whether you like it or not, we're doing this.
Great.
My name's Eric, by the way. I'm the other host of this little program we do.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
I am pretty great.
Good.
Before we actually start talking about Dawson's Creek, I'm just curious. We've all obviously read up your Wikipedia page and everything, but it'd be cool to hear it from your mouth how you got started acting and all that.
Let's see. Well, that would take us back to high school. I'd always, I think, had interest in theater and the entertainment world, but I was a very shy kid, and the high school that I originally was at didn't have a drama program. You would just sign up to do the high school play, and that was way too intimidating for me. And then I switched schools for my last 2 years of high school, and in Ontario, back in the day, we went to a 13th grade. So grade 12 and 13, I was at a new school with a really, really great drama program and a fantastic drama teacher who sort of took me under her wing. Her name was Jan Barrett. And I just fell in love with everything there, from obviously the acting, but we wrote our own plays and we had to build our own sets and, learn how to use the lighting system and the sound, and we would tour, and it was a very advanced theater program.
Oh, wow.
And so she knew that I had sort of an inkling of maybe taking this further, and she introduced me to an agent in Toronto, and he ended up signing me, not because I was particularly talented, but I think I was a cute kid with a good work ethic.
Yeah, that makes it,
so
the work ethic makes a big difference.
Well, hopefully, for someone like me who had a long way to go. So I just started in the Toronto area doing what young actors do, auditioning for commercials and little bit parts and TV and film. And, that's how I started, like everybody, doing the exact same thing, really, just baby steps.
Yeah.
What'd you say your first, major role up in Canada was?
I didn't have any major roles, I would say, in Canada. I was just lucky to get work here and there. I think my very first job was in a CBS TV movie. I think Gary Cole was the lead, if I remember. I can't even remember the name. It's probably on IMDb.
Was it maybe Learning the Ropes?
No. Oh, Echoes in the Darkness. That was the name. Echoes in the Darkness. I think it was a, detective thriller. And, I had probably 2 or 3 lines, scared out of my mind. And Dave Foley was in it, if you remember from Kids in the Hall. He was a young guy.
We're big fans of him.
A little bit older than me. And so it was just my first time on a set. And for the next couple of jobs, all you're doing is just trying not to completely screw up.
Yeah.
And sort of, keep your head low and your eyes open, your ears open, and just learn as much as you can.
I've heard it's a pretty different scene in Canada.
What was that?
I said I've heard that it's a pretty different, just a different vibe in Canada as an actor. You're I don't know, just it's less cutthroat maybe than when you get down into the States.
It's a very different industry up there. Canadian actors have a tougher road.
Right.
There's not a star system. There isn't the same kind of mindset where you're necessarily going to have one job lead to something bigger and something bigger. You constantly, forever, if you stay there, are going to be doing small jobs just to pay your bills. And hopefully you'll get bigger opportunities. And certainly a lot of American projects shoot up in Canada all the time.
Yeah.
And you'll work a fair bit, but you won't get paid the same, and it won't necessarily lead to bigger things. And because they don't have nearly as many programs on television in Canada as they do in the States, if you get, let's say, a Canadian series and you're a lead in a Canadian series, however long that job lasts, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, when it's over, instead of it being a launching pad to, well, you're going to get another series now, you kind of made it, right? Like as it happens in the States. Up there, the mentality is, well, you've been used up. Let's share the wealth with someone else. And
Wow.
so you're right back to guest starring again. And like there is no star system. So it's a scary proposition for a Canadian actor if you're very ambitious. I'm not saying that you automatically need to go to the States, but it's a very, very different career you're going to have if you stay in Canada. You may work more than someone in the United States, but you're going to make less.
Yeah.
And the prospects of you getting to a level of career comfortability may not happen. It's just a completely different industry up there. And I was always very ambitious and knew that I was going to come down to LA at some point. I think it took me 5 years, which was the right thing to do. My growth in this industry has always been very slow, fortunately steady, but I was not a very good actor in my 20s and even into my 30s. I just was very shaky, sort of out of my body always, despite spending a lot of time in training and class. Let's just chalk me up to being sort of a late bloomer in this. And so it was smart of me to stay in Toronto as long as possible. But on the flip side, you don't necessarily want to wait too long to get into the American game because it is so heavily built on new faces and youth.
And youth-oriented, yeah.
And if you're a good-looking kid, whether you're a woman or a guy, there's networks specifically tailored for you, such as the old WB or the current CW,
right.
Where if you're lacking in certain skill sets, if you're darn pretty, they might put you to work anyway, and you can start getting your chops just by working. So it was smart of me to come down when I did, and so I guess my real break, back to your original question, is when I got Bold and the Beautiful in around early mid-'90s. That gave me my first regular job. It allowed me to apply for my green card, and then from there, years down the road, to get my citizenship, and that's when everything kind of changed. I've been a working actor ever since I got Bold and the Beautiful. I think that was around 94, but that took me 7 years to even get to that point.
Yeah.
So I always tell people when they get into the industry, you really should expect to put in 10 years and not consider what you should be doing outside of the industry until you've put in that 10 years. And I've heard that applied to music as well. You shouldn't get into this industry if you're going to say, I'll give it a year or two and see what happens. That's just not long enough. It's way too much of a grind.
I'm curious, what was the experience like on the Bold and the Beautiful? Because we're just we've got a little printout of some of your work here, and it says you did 119 episodes in 2 years. That seems exhausting to me.
Yeah, I think that's probably short. So you know how IMDb never really gets anything right.
True.
I probably did over 300 shows in about 3 years. I think I had a 3-year contract. So yeah, soaps are a grind, and not everybody can do it. You have to memorize massive amounts of dialogue because you shoot at least one show every day, and sometimes you shoot several shows, like maybe 3 shows over 2 days. Now that's more the case with the half hours like Bold and the Beautiful, and I think there were some others back in the day. Not quite the same, I don't think, for the hour shows. But you're memorizing often at least 30 pages. And the problem with soaps is, if you get your lines out grammatically correct or at least even close, we're moving on.
Yeah, they've got another shot.
About performance. It is not about performance.
That's true.
As actors, we're literally holding the sides, which are, the printed out copy of your dialogue. We're holding that in our hands, still memorizing as they're giving us the countdown, like 5, 4, 3. And then they point at you, and all we do is we drop the sides on the ground or stuff them behind pillows on the sofa.
Oh, wow.
And we just try to regurgitate what we just learned and pray to God you got it out in the right order. Because they don't take time. They'll reshoot it if they have to, but they're shaking their head at you like, dude, get with the program. They always say soaps are a good training ground, and I think in some cases it can be, but I don't know. The emphasis sure isn't on the acting from my experience, anyways, and it's a grind.
It's hard to hone your craft when you're under that type of pressure.
A little bit. I mean, you certainly learn to be comfortable on a set. Hopefully, you learn a little bit about the camera and taking the little bit of direction that you get. You don't get a lot of direction, but hopefully as well, you're able to just be working with someone opposite you. And I purposely stayed in class when I was on Bold and the Beautiful because I thought I was horrible and I thought I was going to get fired like any day. And I knew I didn't want to stay on soaps because if you stay too long, then you really do get typecast and you're going to have a tough time or a tougher time getting out of them if you want to move on to prime time. And so, I was purposely trying to play against the melodrama and some of the other things that are inherent in the genre. And that can't be avoided either, by the way. I mean, we make fun of soaps, but they are structured the way they are for a reason. Because you're telling an episode, a whole show, every single day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
For them to give you the same quality of program that you see in primetime, you'd need like a staff room of writers of about 50.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You'd have a bigger budget than Game of Thrones. It'd be Game of Thrones times 3.
Yeah.
To churn out that kind of, because what happens on soaps is that you have to slow it down. Right? So what's the joke about a soap? If you watch it one day and then tune in 6 months later, you know exactly where you are because nothing's moved.
Exactly.
That's kind of the only way they can survive. Can you imagine writing, an episode of ER or Game of Thrones to air every day of the week? It just can't be done. So you have to slow it down. The actors the characters are a little dumber in catching on to what's going on around them, right? You just have to stretch it because you're producing about, however many days a week, days in the year, right, without the weekends. It's a daunting challenge, and so you got to give them a break a little bit for the genre. They're doing the best they can with a crazy schedule.
Well, it's specifics to it's what it's built to be. You can't expect a bench to be a comfortable armchair.
No, you cannot. A bench is meant to be a bench.
Well, so how then did you end up getting started on Dawson's Creek? Let's
see. Well, it was just a regular audition, and I'm trying to think of where I was at that. So we're looking at around 97, 98, right?
Yeah.
I'd been off Bold and the Beautiful for a little bit. I got really lucky, and I got a spelling series and then a pilot as well at Fox, a sitcom. And I was doing them both. And so I guess they had just ended. Yeah, the spelling series got canceled. And I think it was shortly thereafter that this was just a regular audition. And I think it was mentioned that it might be a recurring. I don't even remember if it was, maybe just considered a one-off at first. Mm. And so I got it. And, it's a lucky thing because obviously it's an iconic show and, it was good to me for a number of years. But what I was talking about there was sort of always being a bit of an awkward actor in my 20s and even into my 30s. I think that awkwardness and not being quite settled into who I was as a performer helped the character of Doug. And I'm positive that's what Kevin Williamson saw in me when I don't think he was in the room. I think I went on tape. Mm-hmm. There's a slight awkwardness to Doug, and that's just me, frankly. But it works in this case, I think, with Doug, because he is the butt of the joke, certainly with Pacey at all times. and that awkwardness kind of works.
That was actually one of the questions I'd pre-planned to ask you, because Doug, he's kind of a heel. I mean, he's kind of a jerk a lot of the time, but yet I've never met, like, we've talked to a lot of Dawson's Creek fans since we started this podcast, and everybody loves Doug. So it's got to be some of that awkward innocence that you don't hate the guy.
Yeah,
he's an older brother. That's what older brothers do.
That was that's the writing. I mean, maybe I'm adding a little bit to it as well. I mean, I'm trying to, but it was very clear on the page that Doug's not a jerk. I think it's tough when your younger brother is smarter than you, and he's a wise ass, and he's got your number at all times. And so you're naturally going to be upset. You're naturally going to be short-tempered with him. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, as I think we saw throughout the years, blood's thicker than water, and they, at the end of the day, always were going to be family. If anyone was ever going to be picking on Pacey, Doug would have been there. And I think vice versa, if it were a serious enough case.
For sure.
And so I think that shows through, and I think that's what, the writers always wanted to make clear. Let's have lots of banter. Let there be fireworks, but at the end of the day, they do love each other. And I think you'll understand where Doug's, his anger or his short-temperedness comes from.
Well, and especially that leads into, honestly, my biggest question about Dawson's Creek as a whole, which you and Kevin Williamson could answer. Basically, when did you know that Doug was gay? I mean, because if you watch the series, it plays that way, perfectly, going back and watching it after after the fact.
How it ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something interesting there. Here's some insight for you guys. No one knows this. So I did the first season of Dawson's Creek, and I don't know how many episodes. Maybe you guys know. Did I do around 4 episodes or something like that?
That sounds,
the first season, yeah.
And like I was saying, this is at the WB, right? Well, it's a small little network, and they pay attention to their actors. Mm-hmm. So what happened is, after the first season, I got another WB series called Hyperion Bay with Mark Paul Gosselaar, right?
Oh, okay.
And I had to leave Dawson because I couldn't do both, or they wouldn't have allowed at that time to do both. I went off to do Hyperion Bay. It was a tumultuous year. It didn't really ever quite work. I think we did around 17 episodes, and it got canceled. What happened in that second season is, I think at that time they brought in the character of Jack, right? Mm-hmm. And in around season 5, because after Hyperion was canceled, I went back to Dawson's for season 3 and then on. Mm-hmm. And I asked Paul Stupin, one of the executive producers, in the final year, because I was starting to add some things together in my own head. And I said, Paul, I had always heard that I caused a bit of a kerfuffle here at Dawson's when I left season 2 because they had big plans. And he said, yeah, that rings a bell. And I said, if I hadn't left, was I basically going to be the Jack character that we were going to explore the gay character, quote unquote, the gay character through Doug? And he looked at me and he paused and said, probably best not to ask that question. So I think I totally screwed myself by taking this very short-lived, unremembered little series called Hyperion Bay, and I would have maybe become a series regular on Dawson's moving forward, second season, and Doug would have maybe been the trajectory of Jack. Now, I don't have that totally confirmed, but it makes me wonder a little bit, knowing that it did put a wrench in whatever they were planning when I left. So maybe Doug's trajectory would have been very clear from second season on. Yeah. I think obviously knowing Kevin, a man who was always out in the industry, it's natural. Of course he would have explored a gay character as he did. And if you're going to, start with the series, you naturally would have gone with the character of is he or isn't he gay? And it was not clear, to get back to your question then, really up until that final season, when we came back for that final episode. I think we made. Actually, I don't even remember now because what is it? This is like 15 years ago or more. I'm trying to remember in my own head, did I have an answer and I was playing it one way or the other? I think I probably played him as straight, knowing that with the words and my own portrayal of him, it was never, ever going to be clear. But I think I played him as straight. Okay. And it would be up for the audience to guess whatever that meant. And so my mannerisms sometimes would say otherwise. Certainly the words might suggest otherwise, but in my mind I was going to play him straight. Which is funny though when you think, playing that last episode when it comes out that he's gay, it was no big strange thing for me to accept that. I mean, it's like, well, of course he's going to come out at the end there. That's good resolution for the audience. I think it would have been very. It would have been a big letdown for the audience if it was, he really was straight. You know what I mean? That would have let the air out of the gag, I think.
Yeah, and it really was great. I remember watching the episode when it aired, and when the little scene where you pulled Jack over, and then eventually kiss. I remember being like, yes, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's a good way to do it, right? Like just go full on. Give the big lip lock right there to let the audience know where we're going.
Yeah, it was an exciting moment.
Yeah, it was good. And if I remember, we got nominated for, I think an MTV Best Kiss of the Year in Television or something like that, Kerr and I.
Yeah, I believe
I know he'd had to do a lot of it, over the years. And that was my first, guy-on-guy kiss. And, that scene on the beach worked really well at the end. Yeah, hey, Kerr's a good kisser. What can I say?
Well, that finale is one of, obviously I'm biased because I have a Dawson's Creek podcast and I love this show, but that finale really is one of the most well-done television finales out there, just the way they wrapped everything up in such a way to satisfy the fans, but not like playing fan service too much, what I mean? And I think...
Yeah, and if I remember, Kevin came back to write that. Kevin left technically as a writer after maybe episode 5 or pretty early on in the first season. He got it up on its legs a little bit and then handed it over. But this was always his baby, and when he came back to write that, I seem to remember feeling like, you hit all the notes, and it didn't feel like there was going to be any disappointment from the audience. I think it was done with the same kind of earnestness and the same vibe that the show always had, right? I mean, It was interesting. I watched this episode that you guys, 105 Hurricane, had just been talking about. I haven't seen any of these in, well over a decade. I just haven't seen any of this. And it's interesting to see the show, to recognize, again, why it blew up so big as it did, and very quickly, right? I mean, this show was hot out of the gate. Those kids were on the cover of Rolling Stone, within months of its release.
Right.
And to see what works for it then, and of course what makes it very dated now, it's a fun trip down memory lane. There's just there's an innocence to that time period, and not just in this show, but I can imagine across the board in television, right? Whether it's Party of Five or My So-Called Life, but the pre-9/11 years of television and the problems that teenagers were dealing with, it's a different world, isn't it? And it's fun to go back to revisit that a little bit. It's just a less complicated world.
Yeah, no cell phones or the internet was around, but it wasn't like it is today. Nobody's tweeting.
No, and and it's just the humor is different. Certainly Dawson's had sarcasm, but it's a very different. It's just a very different vibe, and the earnestness is nice. It's genuine, and there's a certain kind of rawness to it all. It's been a fun trip down memory lane.
Yeah, there's sarcasm, but not cynicism, maybe.
No, right?
Yeah.
It's and I think it's a very good point. And it's very different, those two. It's very different.
Yeah, I think it's actually we're almost getting to the point where someone could do a period piece set in that time frame and maybe make an engaging series now set in the late 90s.
I was wondering about that, because I write and I produce as well, right? And I was just thinking about that. Like, when is there or will there be a tipping point when you could revisit something like that and not be laughed off the screen,
right?
Or just no one, caring at all? I bet there might be a tipping point. I'm not sure we're there now yet. I don't know. You look at shows. There's a kind of a new vibe amongst television when you look at shows like Casual on Hulu, which I really enjoy. But there's a certain emptiness in some of the characters, which is on purpose.
Yeah.
It's on purpose, and that's what's making it riveting and interesting. And the structure of shows are very different. You don't have to wrap everything up in a bow, and you don't have to spoon-feed the audience, obviously. We've been not doing that for a long time. But when you have shows like Transparent or Casual or Catastrophe, have you guys seen Catastrophe?
No. Wait, yeah, that's the Rob Delaney and Sharon Horgan show. Yes, that is great.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just so awful to each other, and yet you can see the attraction, and the writing is just so smart and spot on. You might need to be married to really get it, but the cruelness is new. And so the territory that we're covering in television is just so exciting. I don't know if we can quite yet flip it and go back to something a little earnest and innocent. I don't know. I think we're so in love with the new territory we're going in cable, obviously.
What comes to mind for
all the exciting.
Sorry, what comes to mind for me is Stranger Things. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix. It's got a definite...
now that's an interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I was like the only guy on the planet who, when I watched the first episode, I couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
And I stopped. And it wasn't until, over the next 2-3 months when literally the whole world, that's all they're talking about is Stranger Things. And I said to my wife, who's my writing partner and producing partner, I said, okay, clearly I need to go back with an open mind and watch this and see what's going on. But you know what I feel a little bit as well is I feel the machinations of Netflix behind the scenes and their data printouts going, you know what segment of our audience we're not really tapping into? And that this is purely data-driven programming. And I read a really interesting article. I don't remember what trade it was in, what trade's paper, but they realized where they're not getting subscription growth is sort of my age.
Yeah.
So the people that grew up, and I guess I don't know how old you guys are, but
mid-30s.
The audience that grew up, right, in the 80s, and so they literally, and I don't know, did the pitch come to them or did they formulate it with the Duffer Brothers at the same time of like, you know what, we want to be an homage to the 80s, so let's get Winona Ryder, for an obvious reason. Like, we have not seen Winona in years and years, right? Suddenly she's there. And let's get Matthew Modine, because, of course, why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to do a little game of drinking game of how many 80s and movies can you spot in regard to visual eggs or audible clues. I mean, it was an amazing game my wife and I were playing. Like, there's Joss. There's that. There's, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it kind of wraps you in just the game and the music. I mean, I was just thinking about the music composer, how much fun this guy or woman would have had just going into the old synth sound, right?
Oh, yeah. John Carpenter scores from...
Oh, my God, right? Like, how much fun. That's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of job now, because that's never going to be asked of you ever again.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the fun in all of it. I did find it myself, though, we're not doing a critique, I guess, on Stranger Things, but I did find it a little slow and plodding. We know where we're going, and I felt that the ringing it out was just a little slow for me. And I did find the writers sometimes getting caught, and they didn't dial back to fix certain things just because they're like, let's just keep moving. But that's more of a writer thing. But I did end up enjoying it. I did end up appreciating what they were doing. And I just love the opening credits.
Yeah, they're great.
Music. And I can't remember what it's reminding me of, but it's reminding me of a movie very, very specifically. And I want to dig down and define what are they cribbing from the opening credits, because I can't quite place my finger on it. From the graphics and then the sound.
The graphics are very
even
Stephen
the
King.
Font.
Yeah.
It got me because those kids were the age I was at that time period, and so I mean, and everything you're saying is spot on. It is kind of like they made it for me and people in our generation to rope us in.
They absolutely did, and it worked. You know, I mean, Ted Sarandos and you know, I mean, everybody there, they're so damn smart, clearly. I mean, what they've made of that business. But at first, I just felt like I was being manipulated.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way now.
They felt, here's
you brought up some
more subscribers in this one little niche. And okay, you did it. All right.
You've brought up some really good points. I'm now anti-Stranger Things. You've turned me around, Dylan Neal.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of times your wife, who's a writer and producer with you, and I know that you and she do the Gourmet Detective. So,
right.
You know, which new movie is coming out October 9, I think?
That's right. On the Hallmark Movies and Mysteries channel.
It's very hard.
We were not watching in the 80s or when we were 28.
Or anything that existed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
It's unfortunately very hard.
Very different thing.
It's hard to find the previous airings of those. We actually looked for them by means legal and not so legal, and couldn't
not
track
even
them
illegally.
down.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, I know they do pretty well in Europe for Muse Entertainment, which is my the company that technically owns the franchise, and they're my co-producers on these.
Mm-hmm.
I sold it to Hallmark with them. It does really well for them overseas, but yeah, it airs all the time on Hallmark. So unless your TiVo is set to
oh, is it all the time?
on the wish list, often. But
okay.
I imagine you guys, aren't totally up on everything that's happening over at Hallmark every week. I can forgive you that.
Maybe it's not pointed directly at our demographic like Stranger Things was.
But of course,
yeah.
To be fair, neither is Dawson's Creek, and here we are.
Good point.
Here you are, right?
But yeah, I think a lot of our listeners will definitely be into it, for sure.
And no, absolutely. We have a great time doing it. You know, I can tease being at Hallmark. They've been wonderful partners. Obviously, I did a series over there, their first scripted series called Cedar Cove, and that was me and Andy McDowell on the Hallmark Channel. They actually have two channels. They have the Hallmark Channel, and then they have the Hallmark Movies and Mysteries Channel. And so I've been doing a lot of Hallmark over the last 4 years as they kind of ramped up their production schedule, and they keep buying stuff from Becky and myself. As she just came back into the workforce, she had taken, maybe 8 years off to just be with our kids as a stay-at-home mom, and she had been a TV writer previously. So as she got back into sort of the workforce, I was already at Hallmark with Cedar Cove, and I said, well, why don't we just pitch something at Hallmark? I know everybody there, and we'll just start there. And little did we know they were just going to buy literally everything we pitched. So we've been nonstop Hallmark, which is wonderful. But we'd also like to, get back out there and do some other stuff as well. But it's probably a little closer to our own sensibility a little bit, even though Gourmet Detective has been very fun.
Well, based on what I saw of it, and I, found some clips on YouTube and stuff like that, and I actually have some familiarity with the novels.
You do?
Yeah.
You read one of the novels?
Yes. I realized when I was doing research, I was like, oh, this sounds really familiar. Oh, wait, I read, I think, the very first one. Probably, I don't know.
Wow,
yeah.
I've never met anyone that's read one of those. I mean, those are obscure books. Good for you.
Well,
good for you. And so you can imagine, if you have any memory, how very challenging they were to adapt to television.
I was actually going to ask, how is adapting a novel? I mean, how do you do it? And B, how do you do it with your wife? Because my wife and I don't agree on much. If we were to write something,
it's not going to work for everybody. I'll tell you that. That'll either strengthen your marriage or pretty much put an end to it right there.
Yeah.
If you're going to write with a spouse. Fortunately for us, we've had good success with it. We don't do it all the time. We first paired up, and I think it was in 2003 for a pilot that was very, very loosely based on my childhood, and we ended up selling it in a bidding war to Sony, and it was a great experience. And then, for whatever reason, we didn't really do it again until many years later. Books, it depends on the book. You know, these were challenging because they all take place in Europe. They're very much old-fashioned 10 Little Indians, Agatha Christie kind of novels with 40 moving parts and a cast of thousands. Very nonlinear, which makes it challenging for television, especially a network like Hallmark, where you got to kind of keep your sleuthing very simple. And none of the characters that I've included are in the book. So really, all we optioned was the name of the book.
Oh, gotcha.
Gourmet Detective.
Well, to be fair, that's really good.
My character, Henry, is there. The central character is there. But we had to basically make up everything else. And sometimes we keep the conceit of the book of what the mystery is, but then we don't use how he went from A to Z to solve it because it just doesn't quite work. So it's been a lot of work. And then it's also challenging sort of learning the riddle that is Hallmark, because they have a very specific way of telling a story and they have a very specific audience. And so what I had pitched in the room was, look, I'm going to give you basically castle/moonlighting wrapped in a nice little Hallmark bow. And they loved it and they bought that. But then I found out that, well, it's not exactly what they want, though. And so, what I thought I was going to be delivering a castle kind of a thing. It's not really kind of turned into that. Now, it's still a work in progress, and I really hope we get to do some more, because I really feel that the franchise is very much just a work in progress. I'm not completely happy with them yet. Unfortunately, that the audience likes them, but I feel like I'm a mechanic under the hood, still working on that carburetor. I really need to kind of figure it out a little better so that I'm happier. You know,
I think that's the case with a lot of creative endeavors. Is any artist really satisfied when they're done with what they've created, or there's always more probably?
Yeah, I don't know any actor that ever likes watching themselves or ever feel that they totally nailed it. And certainly with writers, you know, when you're writing television specifically, it's always a work in progress. You know, just think of what the first couple of episodes of Seinfeld looked like versus how it ended up, right? It's like night and day. The writers are figuring out the actors are figuring out the material. And then the actors, I mean, the writers, you have to follow the actors that you cast, and they may not be giving you quite how you initially envisioned it. It might be better, it might be worse, or it just might be different. But everyone has to learn each other, and then the actors are learning the rhythms of the writing. And so that's why it's a shame nowadays that shows are canceled so quickly. Like, think of Cheers, right? Cheers didn't become popular until its third season. It was the second last rated show in all of television at the end of its first season.
Wow.
Nowadays, it would have been canceled right after its fourth or fifth season. It needed that time to kind of figure out what it was. But, you know, in an era, we have literally 400 scripted shows now on television. 400. 800 in total if you include non-scripted. I mean, it's unbelievable, the television landscape these days, and there's just no time to tinker. It's like, there's not enough people watching. We're not getting the ad dollar rates we used to. Let's get moving. It's got to catch fire right now, or we're moving on.
On the bright side, if the fans do react to it, you know, in a passionate way, seems like some things can come back, like on a Netflix or Hulu or something. It happens once in a while.
Yes, although I don't think it has anything to do with the fan. To a degree, obviously, there's got to be enough people there. There's a great guy on Twitter for anyone who's into TV stuff, like the serious nuts and bolts of TV. Follow a character named TV Grim Reaper.
Oh, I follow him. Yeah.
Okay, so you know
fan
what I'm
excuse
talking
bingo.
About. So we know about the PR Jedi, right? And how everything in TV is spun, and how fans are always clamoring, like, oh, we'll just get a petition of, a million signatures. And it's like, no. Maybe in the history of television, like 2 shows have ever been turned around because of fan revolt.
Yeah.
What I think happens with Netflix is, again, they have so much data, and they're able to watch in a way that I don't even think Nielsen's can, of what's going on second by second. Is that when a show like Longmire gets canceled at A&E, it's not the fan outpouring that I think, makes Netflix take notice. They just look at their reams of data and the numbers and who their audience is or where they want to go, and they figure out, you know what, there's a financial model here for us that has little to do with a campaign. It's just a different kind of thing. And sometimes you're looking for a lost leader. Like, look at House of Cards, right? They bought 2 years up front for $200 million. They didn't, of course they want to make money. They wanted it to succeed. Mm-hmm. But it was not about that. It was a lost leader. It's like, we're going to plant a flag in Hollywood since we're still the new kid on the block. And this is going to get everybody's attention because we're going to make a movie every week. And it's going to look like a movie. And we're going to put movie stars in it. And we're going to attract a lot of not only attention, but we're going to get the players who want to do good work. They're going to start knocking on our door. And it's exactly what happened, right?
Yeah.
And other shows, I think that the little bit of information they do let out, I think many other shows bring more audience or better viewership than House of Cards. But that House of Cards gambit, oh man, did it ever work. And now they are first stop shopping for everybody. It's like you go to either Netflix or Amazon or, maybe even Hulu. It's not quite the same, but, the networks are dying for product. Yep. No one wants to go there first.
So House of Cards is the Dodge Viper of
right?
Of TV shows.
That's a perfect analogy. It is
the Halo car.
Yeah.
It is the Halo car. It's the Tesla, whatever that little sports car was. Yeah.
Speaking of which, when I was doing research for this interview, I stalked through your Instagram and found number one, you at one point used to own a 69 280 SL, which
oh my God, that was a beautiful car.
Nice ride. I love those.
Yeah. I had a 9-month restoration on that car. It was gorgeous inside and out. It looked like a new car.
Those are wonderful. I love those things.
I never should have sold it. I regret it to this day. And the same for the Bronco. If you're going to go down to the Bronco,
I saw the Bronco as well.
Yeah, I know how to pick them, don't I?
Yeah.
I think those are almost like the number 1 and 2 sought after cars in the country, and their value is just through the roof.
Those Broncos.
You know what's going to be next, though? For those people that want to know, is the classic long wheelbase Range Rover. Mark my word.
Oh yeah.
Those are going to start to move in price. And I had one of those too. I had a '93, so I know those cars. They're going to start moving.
Yeah, I absolutely believe you. And the thing about those Broncos that is so surprising to me every time I see those things, like on eBay or something, going for tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, just for the rusted out body. Well, not rusted out. That's the key, right? They all want the California Bronco because of the lack of rust. Yeah, forget about how it runs or the interior. Just if you got a solid body, you're going to be doing well.
Yeah, 15 years ago, I could have picked up 5 of those for $2,000, all running.
Right?
And never once would I have thought, oh, that's going to be that's going to be a good investment, because that would be crazy.
I know. If we only knew. I would never would have sold that one either.
Well, I feel like we have to bring it back to Dawson's Creek a little bit.
I guess we do. We could cover a lot of territory, though, guys. I think we're in sync here on a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
This is going well.
This is start thinking about the next podcast, guys, and you got to let me in on it. All right? We can cover a lot of territory here. Forget the whole Dawson's Creek thing. That's just a good little appetizer. Let's move on to more important things.
Well, do you have any suggestions?
Carcast.
Well, let me brainstorm.
Okay.
I did want to, since you watched this episode, you took the time to revisit that classic. Do you remember? We've already given the caveat when we recorded the beginning that this was filmed so long ago, and you're a busy guy who don't. Yeah. So if you don't remember anything we asked, that's totally cool.
Okay.
But in particular, just like the scene where you pull a gun on Pacey is pretty memorable.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I have a question about it, but was it fun to pull a gun on Josh Jackson? I guess that's the question.
Well, I think everyone was jealous that I was the first one to get to do it.
Yeah.
I remember it. if I think I remember worrying like, wow, this is a big leap here for obviously a funny little bit, but I'm pulling a gun on my brother.
It goes from irritated. It goes from irritated to completely nuts in nothing flat, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, that's not even a blink of an eye. That's like, Doug's got some real issues here now. Suddenly, okay.
It's one of the things that makes us love Doug.
I do remember it. I think though that day I was just more worried about having to sing that one line, whatever that little lyric I sang, because I am not a singer, and for whatever reason I repeatedly have to end up singing and dancing on the screen, and neither of which I can do at all. So I think I remember being more nervous about that. And looking up online in my hotel room how the song actually went, because I didn't know it or didn't remember it well enough. It was. It was fun working with Josh, though, because obviously we're both Canadian originally, and he's a good Canadian kid, as we say. He's a little bit of what you see is what you get too. He's a precocious kid. He had a lot of experience by the time he arrived on Dawson. I think he had more, a longer resume than all of us, really. Mm-hmm. And he was just very comfortable. He's a smart guy. And he suits that smart alecky character very well, and he's played that character since, in different forms. Yeah. And so I always had fun, hanging out with Josh. And that 105, is that my first episode, Hurricane? Is that where you first see Doug?
I think it's your second.
Second, 4 and 5. Are they like two?
I believe so.
Part 1 and part 2, those shows. Yeah. Those episodes. So it was fun to meet Josh and, sort of welcome me onto set, although frankly everyone was really nice. And I remember in that first episode, which must have been 104 then, Kevin was still in town, and I got invited to one of the sort of the last cast dinners with Kevin before he was leaving back for L.A., and Katie was so young. I think she was literally maybe 18. It was her second job ever. I think she'd only done the Ice Storm before.
Yeah.
Had just finished high school maybe, and had this new car. I think it was like a Mazda something or other, this little car that her dad maybe had got for her, or she got herself. And I ended up driving her to the restaurant because she still wasn't sure on how to work all the controls. I mean, these were young kids.
Yeah.
But they were all very really welcoming, and like on any show with young 20-somethings, everyone's just so excited to have a TV show. It's very heady and so exciting. You feel like you're on top of the world, and I remember it, for myself a little bit, having had some TV regular experience in years prior, and I could see what they were going through, and it was fun to watch. And also, it's interesting is they really kept their heads together. It's very difficult to be a teenager, or in your young 20s and have a hit TV show. You're getting so much attention. You're making a lot of money. And to not kind of spiral out of control a little bit, it's pretty great that we haven't seen some pretty embarrassing headlines from those kids, over those years. They really kept it together.
Yeah, there were no big flame-outs from Dawson's Creek, like there often are.
No, I mean, there's always going to be little things here and there. I think Josh got into a little trouble here and there.
Yeah.
Nothing serious. I think everyone was dating everybody at some point. That's inevitable when you're in your 20s. But I didn't hang out with them that much either, because I was that much older, and I was coming in and I was out and in and out. But they were all really kind and nice, and it was a fun time.
Well, that is great. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah. I am sorry. I mean, it might be more exciting if I did have, lots of dirt and stuff.
Oh, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, my God. Yeah, I know.
Michelle Williams strapped me to a chair and sprayed lemon juice in my eyes for 3 days because I looked at her wrong between scenes.
Yeah, she's just constantly blowing cigarette smoke into my face, It was always funny, though, because she was a smoker back then, too, and she looked so young, right? Like she just looked like a baby, you know. She still had like the cheeks of a young girl, and to see her smoking, I always thought it was always so incongruous.
Wow.
But you know what's interesting too is you could see a little bit of who they've become back then. You know, Michelle always seemed to be sort of more of a quieter type. She was always reading, as was Katie. You could tell she was a really smart woman, and later when she was making the choices that she was making in film that were a little off the beaten path, you could tell that she was going to be smart about this.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to see, you know, what a career she's put together for herself, and she's so talented. And Katie as well. I mean, oh my God, when she got, you know, engaged to Tom and married, that was just so surreal.
Yeah, it was weird, huh?
You know, little Katie marrying the world's biggest movie star of all time. It was surreal to think I, you know, had known her a little bit at that time.
You knew her as basically a child.
Still just a child, you know, this high schooler. That was always very surreal. And you know, Josh and James have both done really well. So it's an amazing success story for all of them.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing we should probably plug while you're on the line. So you're in these little independent films. Something about Grey.
I've heard something about that. Yeah. Oh, that's right. 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah. I mean, talk about another behemoth. You know, when I was first cast in the first one, I mean, just the news cycle. You're just in like every announcement all over the world within like 6 hours. Or, you know, I mean, It was they were making jokes about, you know, like, oh, the janitor just got cast, and let's make a big announcement about it. I mean, every single person that was added to the movie, it was becoming ridiculous. And I, you know, most of my stuff got cut out of the movie. I'm barely in it. And in the second and third, so many of us from the first one we're all glorified extras now. I mean, I'm not doing anything basically in any of them now. Yeah. But to be part of something so big and so hotly anticipated was fun. It was very strange. I can only imagine what those two were going through, you know, and shouldering all of that because you didn't know how it was going to do. You know, I mean, that the books were such a phenomenon, and then with the bidding war on getting the rights, and knowing that to do them probably in a way that gives them justice, you would probably do it NC-17, but you know that there's never ever been a successful NC-17 movie, so that probably doesn't make financial success. But if you make it just an R, you're going to piss off the fans. So what do, right? I mean, it was a very fine line that they had to walk. You know, obviously the gamble paid off with global grosses of over 500 million.
It's
not an easy thing to pull off, regardless of what people thought of the final product or not. I mean, you know, it's unmistakably a massive hit.
It's got to be cool to at least, I mean, no matter how big your role is, to say you've dipped your toe in that pond is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I get. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm always just thankful to be working, period.
Well, and it's a paycheck.
I'm sort of a blue collar actor is how I consider myself. And, working sure beats, digging ditches for a living.
That's true. I sort of do that. So.
Excellent.
Well, he digs ditches to find old bones that he can then catalog and put in a museum somewhere.
I gotcha. Really?
Yeah.
But
it's basically digging ditches. You just have to be really, really neat about it.
Yeah. With the odd brush.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't know. That pretty much does it for my questions. Unless you have any other.
You didn't know I was going to be so long-winded, did you? I kind of cover like 10 questions with one answer.
No, I'm
sorry. I'm
super grateful. In fact, I didn't want to just be reading from a list of questions. I'm not. Neither of us have a lot of experience interviewing.
Not a lot.
And you're just. It's been easy to talk to you, which is great.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad. Well, hopefully this will open the gate, and you'll get somebody else to come on here with you guys.
That'd be fantastic. But honestly, even if it doesn't, and we only have one interview, we're totally happy.
You're done. You got it. You're done.
Yeah, well, we're a year and 9 months in,
It's funny.
Is that how long you've been doing it?
Yes.
We really have. We kind of made it as a joke, but we really do like the show.
You haven't finished? You haven't finished the series yet? How far along are you? Or are you just doing it randomly?
We do it random.
No order from...
Yeah, completely random. We're currently at episode 106.
All right. How many did we do?
128.
Oh, my God, you're at the finish line. You're almost there.
Yeah, but we're doing it out of order. We do it randomly. We actually use a number generator to pick the episode every week, and we do repeats. It's like this is the third time we've watched Hurricane. And
oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, it's one of our favorites, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're not saying it's a great overall idea.
No, but it's the idea we came up with.
And it does have some advantages. The listeners have heard me say this a few times, but watching these in entirely random order allows you to see completely different things. Like, you can really just, focus on a performance rather than where this plot is going, because you know where the plot's going, and,
Yeah. And especially, too, with the drinking you must be doing while doing this. That's got to put a good spin on it, too. In fact... Once you finish all the way through, you should start from the beginning again and do your version of Drunk History and just do Drunk Dawson's podcast, right?
Man. I mean, they kind of already are Drunk Dawson's, at least for me.
Yeah, I imagine you'd have to be.
But the idea, at least in my head when it was conceived, was... Because, I'm a 37-year-old dude, but I really do love Dawson's Creek. I don't know why, but it's always been one of my favorite shows. But I always liked it when I'd catch it on reruns and syndication, and it'd always just be a random episode. I'd never know what I was going to get. It'd just be on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was kind of the idea with this. It's just you tune in, you get a random
you were
one.
The sweet spot, too, for it then, age-wise, weren't you?
Yeah,
when
definitely.
It was on?
We were their age, basically, when it was airing. And I kind of got sucked into it by some other people watching it, and I just dug it. I don't know why. No pun intended.
Dug it.
You just dug it. Now we know where the phrase comes from.
Exactly.
Well, no, it makes perfect sense. I think, we all watched it at the time. It was, I don't remember where it stood in the ratings. I mean, any WB show was never, a top 10 show just because it's a little engine that could. But it was certainly, an iconic show.
Yeah, it was a phenomenon in its own way.
Watched for a reason, And, well, it had to have been the first show, at least that I can remember, that it was never the fact that it focused on kids. We've always had shows focusing on kids and their earnestness. But, Kevin gave them a language that was not based on reality, right? Every other word is a multisyllabic word. And he just put this spin on this microcosm that we hadn't seen before. And I think that coupled with, I guess, good casting, right? I mean, it takes the magic when casting works to really launch a show into another level. And with that world that he created of looking back into a Spielbergian kind of world, with the language that he gave the kids that we hadn't heard before, it was just the right recipe to catch the zeitgeist of the moment, right? And it really took off for those reasons.
Yeah, it was, and like you've mentioned earlier, just the honesty and sincerity of it. It roped us softies in. So,
and also, let's not underplay an important aspect was Doug.
Doug, at the heart of it all.
Yes.
You had Doug pulling up the rear, exactly,
I mean,
so to speak.
We do have many people who've written into our show that say Doug is their favorite character, so...
no, that's great. That's great.
Go ahead. He's withstood the test of time is all I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's great. I mean, I have to admit, I was cringing watching it a little bit. But,
well,
I'm going to do that with anything that I did, pre-2000s.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at anything I have on tape of myself.
Oh, no.
From last week, let alone. But
yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. We don't want to keep you any longer. And you're in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I'm here in LA.
Yeah,
Where are you guys?
We are in Kansas City.
Kansas City. Well, you're the home of Hallmark, the Hallmark family.
We are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, their name is everywhere.
Yes, the Halls. They own the state, I think, don't they?
A couple of big, good-sized portions, yeah.
Yeah, they definitely stake their claim.
Yeah, so if you're ever in town visiting the corporate overlords, give us a call. Take you out to dinner.
I will do that. Yes, I will call you from headquarters.
Hall's headquarters. Before we go, do you want to give one more good plug to the Gourmet Detective, and maybe if you want people to follow you on social media, you could shout that out too?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. On Twitter, I'm at Dylan Neal Studio. I used to have an acting studio, so that's why that studio came in. Oh. And then on Instagram, I think I'm just Dylan J. Neal. I'm on Facebook somewhere under, I think that's actor Dylan Neal.
Yep.
So you can find me there. And then, the third Gourmet Detective is coming up on October 9th on the Hallmark Movies and Mysteries channel. That's with me and Brooke Burns. And if you like castle moonlighting, that love-hate banter kind of thing, like you've never seen that on television before, I know. It's very unique and original, but we do our own version of that, and it's actually really cute. And I have a lot of fun doing those, and so I hope you'll tune in and watch that.
Definitely.
But I really appreciate you guys inviting me on. This was a lot of fun. It's been great going down memory lane. It's been a long, long time, but those were good years.
Well, we're so stoked that you came on, and we're so open with us and letting us know how it went.
Yeah. You got it. Yeah, I hope this works for you guys. And next time, I promise I'll do the drinking on my end so that we're in sync, because I don't want to be left behind here if you're already, 4 beers down the road.
Yep, that's pretty much, that's a pretty good count.
Pretty much it. Did I nail that? Yeah. I'm Canadian, so I'll bring some Canadian beer, and I'll catch up very quickly with my higher alcoholic content. So.
There you go. All right. Well, Dylan, thank you so much, and you have a good night.
You too. Been a pleasure, guys. Take care.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.
That happened, people.
So I guess now we have to anticlimactically plug our stuff.
Well, I am at Ace_Collins on Twitter, interacting with Dylan Neal. Obviously, he's my new best friend. So
the show's Twitter feed is at Talkin' Dawson, TalkinDawson, and you can find me at the Frog with a 0 if you're nasty.
Also, you can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Creek of the Week.
Rate and review us on iTunes. That'd be nice.
Because algorithms.
This feels stupid.
It really does. Very anticlimactic after what we have just experienced.
That was awesome. That dude was so cool.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't actually believe he'd call us until he actually called us.
Yeah. Audience, you couldn't see this, but about every 5 or so minutes, I was waving the mouse at the time of the Skype call.
Yeah.
Holy shit, he's been on the line with us for 30 minutes. This is, how?
He was down to clown. And I think we can officially say, oh man, Whitey, you don't really have to ask him to come on the show when we say it anymore, because he's done it.
He came on the show, man.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. Check out our website at www.creekoftheweek.com. Each episode, including this one, gets its own write-up, screenshot. I'm sure this time will be Doug looking handsome, possibly with a gun in his hand.
Oh, yeah. Doug, yeah. It'll definitely be a Doug screenshot. Where are we at? Email, creekoftheweek@gmail.com. I'm sure I know at least one of our frequent emailers that'll have something to say about this.
Maybe a few things.
About this particular episode.
And finally, thank you, as always, to Sound of Days at sodmusic.com for our theme song.
Do you want to rate...
C+. Everything about this is C+.
This is super long, so I hope everybody's cool with that. If you're not, GFY. Because,
yep.
I mean, hopefully they can maybe... Well, okay, some of this can be edited out because we did record for a long time waiting, but...
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes before.
Yeah. Anyway, people, thanks for hanging in there. I hope that... We got some exclusives
Yes, Sclusies.
Like, that fact that had he not left, Doug might have been a main cast member, and he might have been the new Jack, basically.
Yeah.
Where would the show have gone from there? That would have been pretty great. I mean,
yeah.
Kerr Smith is awesome, and I would never wish him off the show, but that would have been great too.
Yeah. Yeah,
maybe Kerr Smith could have come on as another straight guy.
Possibly. Could have kept dating Katie Holmes.
Could have kept making her come with
words.
words.
Okay, keep it gross, people.
Yeah, we have no reason to extend this any longer, so until next week, I will be Dylan Neal's Fire.
And I could never choose to hate him. Bye-bye.